Shalom. Do you use your mind and imagination? Here is Pastor Dirtz with a reflection about C.S. Lewis and John Ronald Reuel Tolkien. And I want to invite you to their world of mind and imagination. And first of all, let's start with C.S. Lewis, who lived in last century and was Christian author, apologist, literary scholar, and let's say thinker, or sometimes called lay theologian. And he has inspired many people, including me. So I just want to give a short guideline to his work and sources he used. And actually, he was a man of books, and he read many books and taught others and wrote many books. And he was inspired by many ancient books and mythologies and legends. And particularly, he said he was inspired by Northern mythology. He mentioned Balder, for example, a Northern god of light, joy, purity, son of Odin, and other gods and writers who, well, made him to believe that even myths can contain important truths for us. And if our imagination is guided in a certain way, it can lead to truth itself and even God. So what he says about myths in his book Miracles, C.S. Lewis says, myths in general is not merely misunderstood history, nor diabolical illusion, not priestly lying, but at its best a real, unfocused gleam of divine truths on human imagination. Thus, one must understand that what Lewis refers to as myth is not some cleverly narrated story, but truth wrapped in narrative which can, when properly understood, convey great truths to its readers. Or his famous saying, when he reflects on his conversation with friends when he became Christian, was that myths became fact. That's how he understood the meaning of the story of gospel. He says now that the story of Christ is simply a true myth, a myth working on us in the same way as the others, but with this tremendous difference that it really happened. That's what Lewis believed. And then he uses many other myths, including Bible's mythological language, because it's sometimes hard to distinguish where there are symbolic and mythological characters, like in story of nativity, and what are exactly historical facts. But C.S. Lewis believed that God uses also this mythological language to convey important truths to us. And one other source for C.S. Lewis thinking is Greek philosophers or other philosophers, and particularly, for example, Plato. Not many people today, or young people, even know the allegory of the cave, where Plato says that our world is like play of shadows. You just imagine that some people are imprisoned in cave and they don't see a source of real light, but only shadows on the wall. And so our world is similar to this. We don't see final reality in itself. It's outside of this cave. But someday God will lead us out. At least Lewis understood it that way. And he used this parable also in many ways. For example, in his Narnia Chronicles, there is a book, Silver Chair, where also there is reference to this situation. So, and I also advise us to look at small book of C.S. Lewis, The Great Divorce. And this is his trying to imagine heaven and hell in his own way. I don't want to give you many spoilers, but because there are very interesting dialogues between those creatures who belong to hell and those who are from heaven. But once again, I can say that the hell is pictured like a place where people are imprisoning themselves. God wants to lead them out of their illusions and delusions and lead to his final reality. But to do that, we have to make hard choices and also to understand the choices and reality where God is leading us. And C.S. Lewis was also famous of using his intellect and mind as Christian apologist. And for example, I can mention some of his favorite books or most popular books: Mere Christianity, Problem of Pain, and Miracles. I could also mention Screwtape's Letters, which is also maybe a sarcastic or funny way how he describes a devil tempting a human being. But C.S. Lewis was very good at formulating his thoughts in a very simple way that stick to those who read it. So he's very quotable. For example, one of the famous quotes of C.S. Lewis is from Mere Christianity: "I believe in Christianity as I believe that the sun has risen, not only because I see it, but because by it I see everything else." And of course, maybe C.S. Lewis is most famous because of his Chronicles of Narnia, 7 fairy tales that leads us into his special world of Narnia, where there are mythological characters from both Greek, Roman, and mythologies, and also created by Lewis himself. And there are many ideas that are not just for young people or children, but I'm sure they are for everyone. And I could mention also other books that are not so popular. For example, Space Trilogy from C.S. Lewis. And it's sometimes also referred in some ways. I just saw a new TV show. It was called Three Body Problem, and they actually stole an idea from C.S. Lewis' Space Trilogy. And there was just one reference that C.S. Lewis is a shitty writer. Okay, you can criticize him, but basically you steal some ideas from him. But there are, well, that's just one example where Lewis is still quoted nowadays. But C.S. Lewis became himself as we know him because of his friends and books and conversations. And they had this literally group or club called Inklings. And they had conversations in pubs or at C.S. Lewis' home. And the main themes were Christianity, literature, and they even read their own um, stories to each other. And the most famous of them are C.S. Lewis, John Ronald Reuel Tolkien, Owen Barfield, and Charles Williams. But there were also others who joined their group. So they were shaped by conversations among friends. And so also famous writer and philologist is John Ronald Reuel Tolkien, who his works and movies adapted from his works have also inspired so many people. But I just want to mention some ideas, original ideas of Tolkien, that he saw that we all come from Creator, God, who has given us also ability to create. And so he used his ability to create languages, myths, and draw from so many ancient stories and mythologies. And he used the word of mythopoeia. And mythopoeia takes the position that mythology contains spiritual and foundational truths, while myth-making is a creative act that helps narrate and disclose those truths. So he was also working on this mythopoeia. And he said that myth is something that gives meaning to otherwise meaningless world. And the way we use language and myth also creates this meaning. As he said somewhere, there is no firmament, only a void, unless a jewel tent myth-woven and elf-patterned, and no earth unless the mother's womb whence all have birth. And Tolkien tried to be inventive and creative in many ways. He also illustrated his own books about hobbits and Lord of the Rings, and created his own poems and languages. These were his hobbies. And he said that without C.S. Lewis, he wouldn't think of publishing it and make them known to wider world. And also, C.S. Lewis and Tolkien were aware of this criticism of escapism, that they want to run away to some imaginary world or make the believe world or wishful thinking. But they tried to also explain why it is necessary and meaningful. As Tolkien writes, I have claimed that escape is one of the main functions of fairy stories. And since I do not disapprove of them, it is plain that I do not accept the tone of scorn or pity with which escape is now so often used. Why should a man be scorned if, finding himself in prison, he tries to get out and go home? Or if he can't do so, he thinks and talks about other topics than jailers and prison walls. Well, here I even see reference to Plato's cave, as mentioned before. So, Tolkien had many other ideas, and those images have really inspired so many and keep inspiring so many people. And one more idea of his is eucatastrophe, which is made from Greek words eu, good, and catastrophe, destruction. It's like culmination. Or as he says, the sudden happy turn in a story which pierces you with a joy that brings tears, which I argued is the highest function of fairy stories to produce. And here we can refer also to, for example, Lord of the Rings, the ending or several endings of this great story of Tolkien's. So, also, it's important to mention that though Tolkien doesn't speak directly of religion, he was devoted Catholic, and also religious ideas was very important to him. And for example, he says, the resurrection was the greatest eucatastrophe possible in the greatest fairy story, and produces the essential emotion, Christian joy, which produces tears because it is qualitatively so like sorrow, because it comes from those places where joy and sorrow are at one, reconciled as selfishness and altruism are lost in love. So, these are just few examples that invite you to think and imagine and to read those marvelous books yourself.